Welcome back to NFL Spotlight. I am your host, Ari Meirov. We are continuing our team-by-team previews here on the show. Make sure you are subscribed on YouTube. And today, we are on to the San Francisco 49ers. And joining us here, he has covered this team for over 3 decades, does amazing work with NBC Sports Bay Area. It is Matt Maiocco. Matt, thank you so much for doing this. How's everything going?
Everything's going good, Ari. I'm just trying to figure out on a day-to-day basis the 49ers injury situation, who's practicing, who's playing, all that good stuff. So it's been another interesting offseason and training camp. It just seems like this organization always gives me plenty to write and talk about and podcast about. So I'm eternally grateful for for the amount of content that this team gives me.
Well, it's one of the teams in the NFL that, like you said, it feels like it's never ending with things going on, whether it's an injury, a contract dispute. There's so many things that happen over the course of a season, and it's going on again right now. So let me just ask a general question before I get into the players and the coaches. They're coming off a very difficult 6-11 year last season. The overall vibes at training camp, how is it? Is there still that sour taste from last year? Has everyone moved on? Like, what's the overall vibe there right now?
I think the overall vibe is very good. And I would contrast that with a year ago where the practices were just lacking. It just was weird. It's like everybody was focused on where's Brandon Aiyuk today. Oh, there he's on the field. He just shook John Lynch's hand. What does that mean? So there was that just kind of looming specter, and behind the scenes, people were upset that he wasn't practicing. He was a hold in. And then there was Trent Williams, who was a hold out. So I don't know, it just always kind of felt weird, and it felt weird also because they were coming off the Super Bowl loss, and that was an absolutely crushing loss for everybody in the organization. And I just kind of felt like they never fully recovered from that, and maybe it took a 16-11 season for them to recover from it, or at least turn the page. And I think what also has kind of helped maybe off the field as far as the vibe around the team is just this injection of youth. 11 draft picks coming in. It might not help them all that much on the field because they're going to have to suffer through some rookie mistakes early on, but it looks like they got some pretty good players who can help them. It's going to be a growing process. So I think that even that youth coming in and the older guys kind of getting together and saying, we got to teach these guys, the 49er way. I think it's, from my standpoint right now, it looks like it's had a very positive effect just on the overall aura surrounding that team.
Well, you mentioned all the young guys coming in. As part of the offseason, we saw a lot of departures in San Francisco from Debo Samuel and Dre Greenlaw and Charvarius Ward and Talanoa Hufanga and Aaron Banks, Leonard Floyd, countless others who are no longer with the organization. You said they brought in a bunch of young guys. The current direction of the team, is this a reset on the fly, the way we saw the Bills do it last year, or where exactly is the organization right now entering 2025?
Yeah, probably the Bills would be a good kind of comparison. Although, I guess the Bills never took that step back that kind of triggered the reset. But, when people say, oh, the Friends are rebuilding, they're tearing it down and all this stuff and then you look at, what they did early in the offseason, which wasn't much. They waved goodbye to a lot of more players than they welcomed into the building. But then later on, they signed Kittle to an extension. They signed Purdy to an extension. They signed Warner to extension. So when you look at it objectively, I mean, this is not a rebuild if you have a team comprised of, Brock Purdy at quarterback, Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle, Trent Williams, Brandon Aiyuk, who will be back at some point, Nick Bosa, Fred Warner, Diamador Lenore. Those are 8 players right there, and maybe throw Kyle Juszczyk in, although, they released him and then brought him back. He's still, considered the top fullback in the game. Probably not a lot of competition for that crown, of course, but, they still have high-priced players, like really high-priced players at every position group. And so the nucleus is still really good. I mean, as good as any team in the league. Where this team has to win is, in the margins. They can't withstand another season like last year with so many injuries. They have to develop guys, bring them along. They will have had to have made good, wise decisions in free agency with some of the, players who aren't household names that they brought in. You got to find those role players. So it uh, I think the 49ers of this season should be closer to the 2023 Super Bowl season than to the last place 5 games under 500 team of last year. Of course, I'm not saying they're gonna go to the Super Bowl and win it, but I'm just saying that I think they should be in contention for the NFC West, if not the favorite for the NFC West. The Rams are really darn good, but they have the quarterback situation going on right now that is kinda up in the air. Uh, but I would be really surprised if the 49ers don't make a significant jump from their 6-win season of last year.
Before I get into all the players that are there and all the high priced players they have who also got extended this offseason, there was one very significant move on the coaching staff, which is Robert Saleh is back as the defensive coordinator after being let go by the Jets during last season. How big of an impact has that been so far to bring in the guy who started with Kyle back in 2017 and grew with him and was there for the first Super Bowl team? His energy, his defense, his scheme, all of that. Have you felt that already?
Yes, I have, and it's the veteran guys who are excited, thrilled to have him back. It's the young guys already talking about the impact that he's made on them. So, they've been through this before. Kyle Shanahan and Robert Saleh have been through this. In 2017, they inherited not a good team at all. I mean, there was some talent on that team. On that team, it was, DeForest Buckner was, he was great. Eric Armstead was on that team. Uh, but, they really had to build that thing out. Uh, and they're in a very similar situation now, except for there's probably just a little bit more talent on defense. Nick Bosa's had an extraordinary camp. Fred Warner is, I mean, who's going to argue with me if I say that he's the best linebacker in the game right now? And so there is some talent there, but I think Robert Saleh, having been through it once, going to the Jets, learning, kind of maybe fine tuning his vision of football, and then when he became available, that was a guy that Kyle Shanahan wanted, and he remained patient while all these other defensive coordinators were flying off the board. And, Robert Saleh very early in the process said, if I don't get another head coaching job, I'm going to come back to the 49ers with you. So they were upfront, they were like, this is what we're going to do. It's going to be, there's going to be a lot on your plate. And I think Robert Saleh has embraced that. So, perfect is, a word that's thrown around a lot, but he probably is the perfect guy, the perfect defensive coach to take on this because, they're paying him a lot of money and they expect a lot of results.
Well, let me start over here with the offense before I get to all the players that Robert has there on defense, because there are a lot of, I feel like, question marks that people are trying to figure out with this team offensively. And let me just start with the quarterback. Brock Purdy got that 5 year, $265 million contract this offseason. As you well know, fans and social media outside of San Francisco have a lot of opinions on Brock. You covering this team, boots on the ground, knowing them as well as you do, what makes him so perfect for Kyle, for that team? And what was the reason they were as comfortable as they were to give him that contract?
Yeah, I mean, he's from day one, he's just been super impressive. Never looked like a rookie or acted like a rookie or played like a rookie when he was a rookie. Um, there's a lot that Kyle Shanahan puts on the plate of a quarterback. A lot of stuff you don't see, stuff in the run game, obviously stuff in the passing game, the adjustments, everything that a quarterback has to go through and process and be on the right page with the receivers. and he does it extraordinarily well. I see whatever the rankings come out, who are the top quarterbacks in the league, and Brock Purdy is rarely in the top 10 of those. Um, maybe he's 14, whatever the number is. But I would, and I don't, that really doesn't, I don't really give that a second look because I understand it. He might not be the player for every team, for every system. But if you're to rank or have Kyle Shanahan probably rank the quarterbacks who would best fit his system, Brock Purdy would be, I don't know, top 5 or 6. He does what needs to be done. He can make, the knock on him coming out was, probably his size and his arm strength. That probably was it. Um, but he can make all the throws. Is there room for him to get better? Yes, of course. I think he needs to cut down on the giveaways. But I mean, look back at that 2023 season. Yes, he had a lot of good weapons around him, but I mean, the dude finished 4th in the MVP voting. Last year, a lot of those players weren't around. Here, everybody rips on the offensive line, and the 49ers offense was still, number 4 in the NFL. So there's just a lot that he does well. And I think the biggest thing, not the biggest thing, but one of the things was the 49ers knew that if they made him a $53 million a year quarterback, he wasn't going to change. They were getting the same guy every day. And so there's just a lot. He's one of these guys, I would say this. He's one of these guys that the closer you are to him, the more impressed you are by him. In other words, if you just watch him on TV once a month or whatever, you check the stats and you're kind of at a distance, yeah, I could see where you wouldn't be all that impressed. Certainly there are quarterbacks like Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and Jaden Daniels who just blow your mind with the talent level. Patrick Mahomes, obviously, but if you just look at Purdy and what he does and grasp what's being asked of him and how he executes it, he's I can't really say anything bad about the guy. He's checked every box since he's gotten here.
Everyone in the 49ers organization speaks as highly as it is about him ever since he started, taking on games in that first game versus the Buccaneers and Tom Brady. And of course, these last few seasons going to the Super Bowl, what it was last year with all the injuries and staying resilient. And of course, he got that payday this offseason. Now, the players around him, we mentioned it last year, a lot of them, were injured. This year, let me start with Christian McCaffrey. He only played 4 games last year. Very, very difficult season ever since that week 1 Monday night game where he was a surprise inactive, ended up on IR. We know the whole story. How has he looked so far? And does it look like he's all the way back to what he once was?
Yeah, it's hard for me to say he's all the way back, but when you think about that 2023 season he had, I mean, it was spectacular. It was really freaking good. And he's 2 years older. So it's hard for me to say that he's, what he was in 2023, but he's close and he's been healthy. He's been healthy really since, the when he got back into the lineup last year. He had that knee injury, non-surgical knee injury against the Bills when it was a Sunday night game in the snow and he started to look like the old, the Christian McCaffrey of the previous season. And, yeah, in a way that might have been kind of a blessing in disguise because, what like I said, it wasn't a serious knee injury, but it just forced the 49ers to just say, "Okay, that's it. Shutting you down. We'll see you back when the offseason program begins in 2025." So, he's looked good. They give him rest. They don't feed him the ball and practice every rep. He'll practice about 2 or 3 practices, and then they shut him down and just have him working. They have Kittle on a schedule like that. They have Trent Williams on a schedule like that. They even have Nick Bosa on a schedule like that. So they're very cognizant of these are the guys. This is the core. These are guys that it's a long season, so we need to keep these guys fresh and healthy. And so he looks like Christian McCaffrey, and he is he is vital. There's no question about it. You look at last season, or let's go back to 2023. He scored 18 touchdowns in the red zone, and I think 24 touchdowns total. That sounds about right. And last year, their struggles are in the red zone, and he helps out everybody. I mean, think about it, he helps out Purdy because Purdy last year was running around and trying to make plays. He really didn't have a check down option in the passing game. So McCaffrey helps Purdy from that same standpoint. McCaffrey helps the offensive line. He helps the receivers by taking coverage away. He certainly helps George Kittle. So I think everybody benefits from having Christian McCaffrey out there on the field.
Well, the team also traded away Jordan Mason this offseason, who became the starter last year when Christian was out. Who is that guy this year who is behind Christian? Because it feels like there's injuries. They've signed a couple of veterans. They're getting injured. Like, who would be that guy right now if the season started tomorrow?
Well, if the season started tomorrow, it'd probably be Patrick Taylor Jr. He's a veteran who made the roster last year based a lot on special teams and then ended up playing some later in the season after all those injuries that you alluded to. So it would be Patrick Taylor Jr. And then probably the third would be Corey Kiner, an undrafted rookie from Cincinnati. And he's played well in camp, but he's a rookie. Everyone being healthy and all things being equal, the number two is Isaac Grindo, but he sustained a shoulder injury a couple weeks ago, and he's going to miss some time. Should be ready for the start of the regular season. So Grindo is a guy that, in essence, made Jordan Mason expendable for ours. Tendered Mason at the second round level. They never intended on paying him. I think it was like $5 million,
Wow.
whatever that tender is. But they were able to retain his rights by giving him that tender, and then they traded him to the Minnesota Vikings, who then worked out their own deal with him. So, Garendo is a guy. They also drafted Jordan James from Oregon. He's been out. He first had a knee issue that kept him out for a few practices, and then he broke his finger, had surgery, so he's out a couple weeks. So, yeah, you're right. I mean, there's a lot of comings and goings and a lot of moving and shaking on that running back depth chart. And they did bring back Jeff Wilson Jr. This week, and probably seen as he'd be considered a long shot to make the roster, but they need people to practice, and he's somebody who can step right in, and they don't have to slow down drills or anything because he knows what he's doing.
Well, as you see, there are injuries there in the backfield as of right now, and we'll see if they'll be ready for week one. The pass catching landscape right now is all over the map. I mean, Kyle Shanahan said that Brandon Aiyuk at the earliest will be back in week six, might be longer than that. Jawan Jennings dealing with this calf issue. He also wants a new deal. Demarcus Robinson could get a suspension to start the year. Fourth round rookie Jordan Watkins has a high ankle sprain. Ricky Pearsall is healthy. That's a good thing. But what's the story here when it comes to the receivers entering this season?
Well, you laid it out there. Yeah, I mean, you just go down the list. And, the 49ers top 4 or 5 receivers, there's something going on with all of them. And the only one who has been healthy is somebody who reported to training camp and was on the pup list with a hamstring injury, and they just kind of brought him along slowly, and that's Ricky Pearsall. And he looks good. He looks really good. First round draft pick last year. But, if Juwan Jennings is healthy, I describe him right now as like calf/contract. You ask 4 people or 5 people around the 49ers organization, what's going on with Jennings, and you get different answers. But there is a calf injury there, so it's something he's been battling for a while. And then other people kind of roll their eyes and going, well, I have a feeling his calf injury is going to heal up in a hurry once he gets his contract, if he gets his contract. So they're in a situation there. And I don't know if you're going to ask me about George Kittle, but he's clearly their number one receiver. He's a tight end, but their wide receivers, man, there are opportunities there. Jordan Watkins looked good. But in the preseason game, he made this 50-yard catch that was really impressive against the Broncos' number one defense, I might add. But then, he messes up a few routes and makes some mental mistakes, and he gets the blame inside the building for an interception that Mac Jones threw because of a miscommunication, wrong route. Um, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of opportunities for a guy like Robbie Chosen or Isaiah Hodgins or Tariq Owens, Junior Bergen, a 7th round draft pick from Montana. I mean, I, I don't know what they're going to do as far as are they going to go out and try to get somebody, a veteran guy? I think right now they feel like everybody will be available. Oh, Demarcus Robinson, he's facing a suspension. He's had a good camp. So I don't know that they're gonna go out and get a guy like Amari Cooper or somebody with a name because there's this gray area of some of these guys or a lot of these guys might not be available week 1, but they are expected back a little bit later, so they kinda have to balance, what's good for them short term versus what's good for them long term.
I want to hit quickly on the offensive line here because, as we mentioned before, there were some departures there. Aaron Banks got a crazy contract in Green Bay. Jalen Moore, who was primarily a backup to Trent Williams, but when he did play, was pretty good. Ended up in Kansas City. Trent Williams is back and healthy. No holdouts or anything with him. The rest of the offensive line, is there any competitions there, or are we set with the five with Ben Barch and Jake Brendel and Colton McKivitz and the rest of the group there?
It looks like they're settled. The one, quasi competition was at left guard to replace Aaron Banks, Ben Barch, and Nick Zakelj, but, hey, Barch looks like the guy, and their offensive line coach, Chris Foerster, even said, it's Barch's job to lose. So, their starting 5 looks set with the players you mentioned, and, the offensive line is something where I don't think it's as nearly as bad as the fan base here thinks it is. Um, they like you said, I mean, it seems like they've always been a top 5 offense, most of the seasons here with Shanahan, and so it's hard for me to believe you can be that productive of an offense every year and have an offensive line that's as bad as what a majority, it seems like, of the fan base here believes it is. So, um, the thing that I think helps him is the continuity, only having to replace one offensive lineman, this season, and we'll see. At some point, Trent Williams is gonna slow down. I think that, McKivitz is better at right tackle right now than he was last year, which was better than what he was his first year as a starter. Dominic Pooney, looks like a guy who could become, perhaps down the road, a perennial Pro Bowl player. Uh, Jake Brendel gets a lot of heat here in the Bay Area, but 49ers like what he does as far as, getting the guys on the right page and doing what's needed to be done at the center position, and then we'll see with Ben Bart. So, um, yeah, the offensive line is set. It was a surprise to a lot of people, myself included, that they didn't add an offensive lineman in the draft until the 7th round. Heck, they took a quarterback that was gonna redshirt this year, Curtis Rourke, a guy who coming off a knee injury that won't even be available. They took a quarterback before they took an offensive lineman. So I didn't expect them to take an offensive lineman at, say, number 11 overall, but I did expect it at some point, early, 2nd or 3rd, 4th round at the latest. So they're rolling with what they had from last year.
Well, let me talk about that draft because you mentioned there were no offensive linemen taken until very late. The first five picks in that draft were all defense. Was that by design, do you think? And are any of those guys showing up right now as a potential complement on the defensive line with Nick Bosa?
Yeah, the Robert Saleh draft of 5 defensive players. Um, It wasn't necessarily by design, like, they didn't go into it saying, "We're going to take 5 defensive players, with our first 5 picks." That wasn't the case. It's just how the draft shook out. I mean, John Lynch says that there were scenarios that if Michael Williams wasn't there at number 11 and they kinda thought he might not be there, that they would have taken an offensive lineman at number 11. Who that would have been, I don't know, but I think they believed the Saints were gonna take Mykel Williams. Saints ended up taking Kelvin Banks, right? And so just putting 2 and 2 together, it almost sounds like if the Saints had taken Williams, the 49ers would have taken Banks at 11. That's kind of reading between the lines. That's kind of why I feel. So, there were other scenarios where an offensive lineman went before they selected. So it wasn't by design, but in retrospect, it seems like the 49ers organization was pretty happy with the way it all came out because they ended up with, they have a lot of holes to fill on the defensive line, and among those first 5 picks, they get Michael Williams, they get Alfred Collins, they get CJ West, 3 defensive linemen. They've needed a nickelback ever since K'Wan Williams left and they got Upton Stout. He's been a standout in camp. And then they want to get a linebacker to potentially replace Dre Greenlaw. They get Nick Martin. Nick Martin's kind of struggled here in training camp, as has Alfred Collins. But so I don't know that those guys are necessarily starters week one. With Nick Martin, I don't think so. That looks like it's going to be D winners. But I think all in all, they did a good job of getting guys who are made of the right stuff. There's how whenever you meet a young guy, you can kind of get that first impression of, yeah, I don't know, or wow, this guy, he might not be there now, but yeah, he's going to get there eventually. That's kind of the way I feel when I've met these 5 guys, or at least most of those guys, where it's just kind of you get that feeling like, okay, man, it's really important to them. You can tell, and so that's kind of the feeling that I've gotten. So they'll need those 3 defensive linemen to be part of a rotation. They don't all have to be superstars, but if they can hit on 2 of those guys immediately, then I think this team will be in pretty good shape.
Well, overall with this defense, we know about Nick Bosa, we know about Fred Warner, but like we spoke about in the beginning, there have been so many departures with this team. You mentioned Upton Stout has been a standout so far there in camp. Are there any other guys who are shining so far? Because one thing with the 49ers, which I could give them kudos for, they are pretty good at finding guys wherever it is in the draft. I mean, Tonao Hufanga all of a sudden had an all pro year. Dre Greenlaw was a great player as a late round draft pick. Diamond Dor has turned to be a great draft pick. Are there any other guys there, not just rookies, who have been standing out so far in the defense?
Yeah, one guy that has been playing really well on the defensive line is Kalia Davis. It's funny because I was just talking to DJ Jones, who was a really good defensive tackle for the 49ers. They decided they couldn't pay him. He goes to Denver. Now he's on his second contract there and leading, or one of the guys in the middle of a really good defense for the Broncos. But he kind of laughed when I was asking him about CJ West, because CJ West has always heard the comparisons of himself and DJ Jones. So CJ was like, I can't wait to meet, the Broncos and the 49ers had a joint practice. And so he's like, I can't wait to meet DJ Jones and maybe, pick his brain a little bit. And when I was talking to DJ Jones, he kind of laughed and he goes, they're still trying to find me. And and I was like, yeah, they are. And one of the first guys that they tried to find him in was Kalia Davis. He's had some injuries, but man, he really looks good this training camp, as a defensive tackle. One guy who really has come on strong to the point of now I'm starting to think of him as a week 1 starter, and that's Marquise Siegel, the safety from Kansas State, where he did not participate in the offseason program, had some nagging injury, and they just kind of shut him down and said, we'll see you in training camp. And maybe the first week of training camp was, whatever. Then the pads went on and he started making plays. He looks good out there, and he really looked good against the Broncos. And the thing that really helps the 49ers and, the fan base here was up in arms about a 30-9 preseason loss, but I was looking at it through a completely different perspective. I'm sure the 49ers were too, and that's because the Broncos started their first offense and their first defense. And the first offense played 19 snaps. The first defense played 12 snaps. Meanwhile, the 49ers just sat out all their guys. And so it was the 49ers second team against the Broncos first team. And so then it meant, of course, that the 49ers second team was going up again, or I'm sorry, the other way around. The Broncos second team was going up against the 49ers third team. So the 49ers were always punching at a higher weight class going up. And so to me, that was great film for the 49ers coaching staff. And it was good for anybody who popped on film. You could look at it and go, sometimes in the preseason, a guy will get, whatever, 3 sacks in the fourth quarter. And, everybody's going, oh my gosh, this guy's a star. How are they going to keep him off the 53-man roster? And then you look at it and you go, oh my gosh, he got those sacks against a guy who's not going to be certainly on the 53-man roster and isn't going to be on the practice squad. He's probably the last game he's ever going to play was right there. So to see guys like like Kalia Davis and Marquise Siegel step up and perform well in that first preseason game, I think was very telling. And Kyle Shanahan said this week, he's like, Siegel has definitely put himself in that competition because right now Malik Mustafa is out. He had ACL surgery in January. He was a presumptive starter at safety, and the 49ers starting safeties by and large this training camp have been Jair Brown and Jason Pinnock, and now Marquise Siegel is very clearly in that contention for a starting spot as well.
I mean, like I said before, I mean, there's so many guys on this team over the years that all of a sudden pop out. And I appreciate the fact that you brought the context into all of this when it comes to preseason games because a lot of people never ever mention that whenever it's on social media or whatever it is with these different players who do well or don't do well or whatever. The context matters, and I really appreciate you doing that. Matt, the last thing I ask every guest who comes on over here for the season previews is you guys know the teams better than anybody from the front office, ownership, trainers, players, coaches, everybody. This is the NFL Spotlight Show. We love spotlighting people who deserve more recognition. Every Tuesday, we have a spotlight guest here on the show from somebody around the NFL. Who is somebody from the 49ers organization who you think should be on the show here in the future?
Oh boy, that's a good one. Um, well, if we're talking about, looking at just the entire organization, and this organization has done a very good job of either sending coaches, and coordinators or other coaches to other organizations for higher profile jobs or executives as well. And the one executive that I think is going to be a superstar, and I'm not sure when it is. It might be this next hiring cycle. He's in the scouting department. He's been there for a while. He knows the league well. He knows the college game well. His name is Josh Williams, and he's the director of scouting and football operations. And he is just he's got the presence. He's smart as heck. He will be a general manager in this league, and it might be soon. And whoever gets him is going to get themselves one heck of a leader. So he got it on the radar a little bit this last off season when he was interviewed for the general manager job of the Jaguars. And so he has good connections around the league. Josh Williams is a rising star and somebody within the organization that maybe not a whole lot of people know about right now, but I would say clearly in my mind destined to be a general manager down the road.
The 49ers have seen Adam Peters become a GM, Rand Carthon become a GM, Kwesi Adolfo was there at one point, who's now the Vikings GM. And like you said, Josh interviewed in Jacksonville. He was one of a few finalists there before it went to James Gladstone. And Matt, I actually did put in a request for Josh recently. So we are on the same page with him because he is a future star in this league. And it's cool to hear somebody else say it as well. So we're working on it and hopefully it does happen. But Matt, I want to thank you for coming on here on the show. Really appreciate all the time, all the insight on this 49ers team, the 2025 season. And you are one of the best when it comes to covering teams, regardless of what team it is. And we appreciate all the great work you do all year long.
Well, Ari, I'm flattered that you reached out to me. I appreciate it, and that was a lot of fun. So thanks so much for having me.